I'm excited to be sharing with you the publication of Dismantled, a recently released book that I'm very proud of. The subtitle is Abusive Church Culture and the Clergy Women Who Leave, published by Tehom Center Publishing. I wanted to share this with you to let you know how to get a hold of the book, a little bit of the background behind it, what you can expect when reading it, and then a thank you to all the people who were involved in helping get this out into the world. So those of you who have been following my work know that this book is the culmination of my PhD research and dissertation on the psychological safety and interpersonal boundaries of Gen X and millennial clergy women and their decisions to leave active ministry or specific leadership position, and many of them to leave organized religion altogether due to the systemic abuse that they experienced and their colleagues experienced. So this book is basically the culmination of that research with some other helpful guide points to be using this work in a practical way, both for institutional change from within and helpful pathways for healing and recovery for those who endure and experience this kind of systemic abuse. And not just within religious organizations or Protestant church culture, which is the case with this book, but this really applies to any workplace culture or institutional system that has embedded narratives of feminized servanthood, is what I call it in the book. That's the expectation of the self-sacrificial woman. And institutions that have that patriarchal narrative are especially vengeful toward self-differentiated women leaders who have strong and healthy boundaries, appropriate boundaries, but in that agency are really resisting some of those narratives of the always available and compliant woman. So there are a lot of dynamics here that are also particular to Protestant church culture with the governance and polity within those congregations, but I really encourage any woman leader or any manager in an institution that wants to make more equitable environments for their staff to take a look at this book and the theories within it, and not necessarily focusing on the particularity of it being from a church context. So a couple of the things that I want to share here today, and of course I'll point you to the actual book and research in the description box below, but I want to name some of the specific elements of what the participants in this research expressed when talking about what an abusive workplace feels like. So these are described in more detail with personal anecdotes and elements of the interview transcripts in the actual book. But an abusive workplace feels like not being able to take up space, absorbing others' emotions at unhealthy levels in which one's empathy is being exploited, harmful humility, the feeling of not being good enough and having to make all the adjustments in one's own self as opposed to other people making adjustments and behavioral changes, physical unravelings and the need for many of the women in this research to take medical leave or be hospitalized due to stress-induced health conditions, and what one of the women described as physical unravelings, whether it be migraines, slipped discs. One of the women described colleagues who had brain aneurysms due to the chronic psychological abuse in these contexts. And then generally, the women described experiencing trauma and abuse. Things that, experiences that reflected elements of domestic violence, of narcissistic abuse, manipulation, and gaslighting that were very much reflective of other aspects of abuse that we hear about in terms of intimate partner violence. The next piece I want to describe are more theoretical or conceptual ideas around what are the dynamics that create a toxic workplace, particularly for empathetic women leaders. The first is boundary backlash, and the notion that when there's a self-differentiated woman who maintains and promotes healthy boundaries, that others resist that and resent that, pushing back and targeting that woman who herself has healthy boundaries. Infantilization and the treatment of an adult woman as having childlike attributes, and the need to not only physically adjust or tamper with a woman's physical body, but also not accepting her knowledge and expertise and leadership in areas where she is well within her bounds to express that positional power. feminized servanthood, which I talked about before, the narratives that continue to be prevalent within society of the self-sacrificial woman, and women who do not comply with those narratives being seen as entitled or difficult or aggressive. Sacrificial embrace was an important dynamic, and this is particularly within caregiving professions, in which an individual has a deep sense of calling or purpose. The idea of sacrificial embrace is overriding feelings of psychological abuse because of a strong sense of call or purpose in one's work. The mother-daughter wound was very prevalent in this research, and the idea that when working in an intergenerational setting, older women with internalized sexism who have been denied opportunity and voice and agency in their lives resent and harshly target and criticize younger, more agentic women leaders or women with agency and autonomy. Toxic masculinity has become much more of an understood concept these days, but it's the inappropriate and violent use of male aggressive characteristics, oftentimes from a male leader who is overcompensating for insecurities that they have in their personal and professional life. And then lastly, gendered scapegoating is a prominent aspect of this research, where if you have, again, a self-differentiated woman working within a highly patriarchal structure and narratives in her workplace setting, that self-differentiation, that agency that she has, others, whether it be a toxic male leader or a woman with internalized sexism, will target that woman, devalue and discredit her leadership, and ultimately corral around her with others to effectively push her out of a leadership position. Now, overall, it's a really heavy book with content that can be triggering for people who have experienced this. I do say that as just a warning, so that you're aware of that. But I do find those who have read this work and who have participated in this work have found it to be extremely healing, because it allows their experiences to be seen, heard, and validated. An important part of the research involved the healing process of the women themselves, although that was not necessarily the focus of my research question, looking at the interpersonal boundaries that were violated. But of course, in the sharing of this and having left these toxic workplace environments, the pathway toward recovery was very much an important part of the women's experiences. So that is a significant part of the later part of this book. And I think it's important to raise, and I do this in the book, that we not have oversimplified or glorified understandings of resilience and what has been referred to as the bounce backable woman, that if a woman goes through hardship, it just helps her develop grit. That's an important part of her self journey. That is not what I'm promoting here. In fact, what I'm really promoting is the painstaking work of recovery and healing that takes a lot of self-awareness, ongoing therapy, and agency and decision-making on the part of each individual woman. So I highlight that as a way to reframe resilience, in which victimization is acknowledged and addressed, but also at the same time really centering the woman herself and her agency in moving forward in her life and professional path was an important part of my approach as a feminist researcher. So I will also include in the description box several book launch events that I would love to invite anyone who is interested to attend. I will include my email in that below, so you can reach out to me to receive the Zoom link. But over the next couple of months, they'll be focusing on a survivor safe space for individuals who have experienced these kind of dynamics, not only in Protestant church culture, but in other professions where these narratives are very prevalent. I'm also hosting a scholars roundtable, which will be for people who are leadership practitioners and scholars in the fields of relational cultural theory and embodied leadership, transformational and authentic leadership, and anyone who is interested in promoting more liberative research models and leadership spaces in today's world. And lastly, a event that I'll be hosting for what I'm calling advocates of change. Those are individuals within religious culture. So these are people working for change within the system in denominations and church leaders themselves who would like to learn more about these dynamics and how to support clergy women who are actively experiencing these issues in their ministry contexts. And lastly, I want to offer a huge word of gratitude to the individuals who participated in this research, including 20 clergy women who shared incredibly powerful testimonies, as well as an additional 15 clergy women who participated in a pilot study prior to my dissertation work. Also, thank you to Antioch University and the Graduate School of Leadership and Change, where I completed my PhD work, as well as all of the individuals who have supported this work by amplifying it out in the world, not only in church contexts, but in the larger leadership field, in particular in areas that affect empathetic women leaders. And again, I'll include any other details and draw your attention to my website in the description box below. You can learn more at lynnhoran.com/dismantled.